I beat Rockman Forte, also known as Mega Man in base, in one sitting without taking any damage. This game is known for being tough, and it sure was an adventure to beat it without taking a single hit. If you want to see the full VOD of gameplay for this run from my live stream, check out the links in the video's description. Here are the rules for this run. In previous videos for this challenge series, I spend more time reviewing these rules, but for brevity's sake, this run is performed real-time by me on an actual console with strict rules. No turbo controller, no major glitches, and most importantly, no damage or deaths allowed. If you'd like to hear more about the rules for this challenge in general, check out one of the earlier Mega Man Challenge Run videos. But one of these rules sticks out, unique to this game. Why is beat banned? They're just Mega Man's bird friend built by Dr. Cossack. What could be so controversial about them? They're just too good for this challenge. Beat can be bought from the shop in this game after defeating 6 Robot Masters for 300 bolts. In this game, Beat has an unusual mechanic. They function as a shield. While Mega Man is in the shield, he takes no damage whatsoever. Mega Man can only fire uncharged Mega Buster shots while Beat is active. The way it works is that just having the shield out slowly drains weapon energy, but then if Mega Man would otherwise be actively taking damage, the weapon energy would drain a little bit more. This is obviously extremely powerful. Many rooms in the game can be cleared simply by activating Beat, then platforming through. Some boss fights could utilize it heavily too. In my mind, although it would make the gameplay interesting, I felt it was not representative of a normal, honest playthrough of the game that was consistent with my other entries in the No Damage series. I decided to not allow it from personal preference. It made things tougher but also more fun in my opinion. Rockman Forte was released for the Super Famicom in April 1998. This was 2 years after the release of Mega Man 8 for the PlayStation, so it's a very rare occurrence where a game series goes to a previous console for its next entry. This game lifts some assets in the art style from Mega Man 8, but mostly has unique artwork and content. The original release never got an official translation in the West. In August 2002, it received an official port to the GBA, and this version was localized in March 2003 to Western audiences. Besides a smaller screen, the GBA version does not have material differences to the Super Famicom version. I performed this challenge on the original Super Famicom version. Rockman Forte might not be a numbered entry in the series, but for all intents and purposes, it is a classic Mega Man game. It features 8 Robot Master stages, a set of castle stages, has a shopping system, and otherwise feels like a Mega Man game. It is known for being notoriously difficult for first-time players. The game has some very challenging sections with tight jumps and a swarm of enemies. There are no E-tanks in this game, just like in Mega Man 8, but also no rush medic either. The intro stage is somewhat unbelievably difficult, and players who make it through Cold Man and go to Burner Man's stage can get a rude awakening from Burner Man's fight. The final castle stages are also very tough and unforgiving at times, like how King Tank does not have a health bar to scope out what's working or what's not. Let's begin by talking about the route. Later, we'll review the run stage by stage and get into some specific details for each one, but for now we will discuss the route for navigating this game. Right off the bat, I chose to play this game as Rockman. Forte is a fun character to play as, and he'd be interesting for this challenge, but I decided to play Rockman to be consistent with my other no damage challenges. The first decision is to decide where to start the game after completing the intro stage. In Rockman Forte, you can only choose one of 3 stages to begin with, and they each branch out to more stages based on proximity. The answer for the first stage is obvious, it's Cold Man stage. Cold Man stage is very reasonably completable with Mega Buster only, including its mini-boss Snowler and the fight against Cold Man. Further, Ice Wall is one of the best weapons in the entire franchise with its incredible utility and damage-dealing capabilities. A consideration of the routing in the early game is to identify which stages are problematic and if any of them should be done earlier if possible, even if it requires ignoring the standard weapon weakness route. Astro Man's stage is somewhat problematic, but it turns out having a few sub-weapons helps immensely, so it isn't done quite just yet. Burner Man's stage is next, and having Ice Wall is basically a requirement for the fight. Further, Ice Wall gets a lot of usage in just navigating the stage. Then next up is Pirate Man's stage, a stage very clearable with both Ice Wall and Wave Burner. As mentioned before, Astro Man is a consideration for clearing early, so I tackle this stage 4th. Most boss fights in Rockman Forte get a huge benefit out of having their weapon weakness, but Astro Man's fight is a clearable fight without his weakness. The main difficulty of Astro Man's stage is Fun Hallway, the fourth screen, which is a long horizontal stretch with random enemies. This is a potential reset heavy stage, so it's good to try to do it a little bit earlier for the efficiency of getting the winning run. Afterwards, Ground Man is done next, where both Wave Burner and Remote Mine get a lot of usage from the previous Robot Master stages. Weakness order is followed from here, so Tengu Man is next, then Magic Man. Both of these stages have some tricky parts to them, but at this point in the routing, following weakness order is more than sufficient. Rockman Forte has a weapon stage that forces the player to prove that they have all the weapons in order to make it to the final castle stages. For every weapon proof, the player gets a large 100 bolt reward, which is excellent for shopping. A quirk about this game is that when the player enters a new stage after doing the weapons stage, they actually don't refill their weapon energy to max, but they will refill weapon energy after completing a stage. So by doing 7 out of the 8 weapon proofs before the 8th stage, the player can enter the final castle stage with only having to use 1 weapon energy usage. In other words, it's more efficient for weapon energy usage to do the weapon stage just a little early. The shop is fully open after 6 Robot Master stages are done, and there are many interesting and valuable upgrades in this game. For this challenge, I pick up a few things. First, the Weapon Energy Balancer, which will replenish weapon energy on other weapons if the currently selected one is already full, which is a nice to have. Second, the Weapon Energy Saver, which is massively beneficial to getting more weapon energy usage, especially for the fights against King and Final Wily. Third is the High-Speed Charger for Mega Man's Mega Buster, which helps in general everywhere, but in particular for the upcoming Dynamo Man fight. Finally, I buy Rush Search for the chance of getting some extra weapon energy before some boss fights. There's no real need to do this shopping before the 8th Robot Master, so with the bolts acquired from the weapon stage, I easily have enough currency to afford it all. Dynamo Man stage is next. You might be wondering why not to do this stage right after Astro Man, considering copy vision is Dynamo Man's weakness. The main reason is that the mini-boss, Move Cannon, is very nicely cleared with Spread Drill, which comes from Tengu Man. Further, I think that Ground Man and Magic Man are slightly more difficult stages, and doing Dynamo Man last with the High-Speed Buster upgrade felt overall better to me. From here, the route goes through the weapon stage one more time, then it's off to the castle stages. Between the Weapon Energy Balancer and the Energy Saver, weapon energy routing is not a huge consideration as long as the player takes opportunities to refill whenever they can. That's all for the route overview, so let's get into the run. The journey begins in this game's intro stage, which is not at all a trivial stage. To cover briefly, this game actually has a set randomness state upon booting up the game. Try it yourself. If you shoot a fully charged Mega Buster into the first met enemy, you will always get a small bolt drop. Specific actions in this game force the RNG or randomness seed to update, including shooting enemies with the Mega Buster. This has some implications in the intro stage, in particular during the drill hallways with the mole enemies. The whole stage is done in a particular way to try to ensure that the final hallway is favorable. Once the player reaches the outside section with the rain, the quote-unquote manipulation of randomness is gone for the rest of the game. At the end of the intro stage, sadly our friend Blues, or Proto Man, is mercilessly cut in half, but we'll see him again soon. The Green Devil fight is a simple fight without much difficulty, but the floor goop does have 2 different speeds, so I have to play careful to avoid the fast one. Cold Man is the first Robot Master, and it starts off with basic platforming. The Snoller mini-boss is best defeated before it starts jumping around, which can be done with good precision on buster shots. This is a somewhat impressive looking fight that I learned from my speedrunning days with this game. Afterwards, the rest of the stage is also cleared just fine with Mega Buster only. Cold Man's fight is one of the easiest in the game, and as long as the player is aware of the Mokumo Kumo Cloud enemy he spawns, Cold Man goes down easily. Burner Man stage was one of the most reset heavy in the whole campaign of doing this challenge. I don't think it's particularly hard per se, but it has a lot of small things that can catch you off guard. Ice Wall helps with the gory blue enemies and with climbing the vertical section. More than any other stage in the Robot Masters, managing weapon energy is important here. If no enemies drop weapon energy, the player has to collect some of the static weapon energy drops to not run out of Ice Wall. In this run, I fully ran out of Ice Wall before the spear poking room, but it works out fine. The spear poking room is always a little tense, and the 2 rooms after feature some Murigatory enemies that spawn randomly, so I always have to be ready to unleash a charged buster shot. The final screen is taken slow and carefully. Some enemies like the Dodonpa cannons here spawn off screen, and taking them out early is extremely helpful for avoiding the giant Telly's flame attack. Burner Man's fight is a very specific and very particular kind of fight. You either get it immediately, or you don't and he goes into burner mode and starts wrecking you hopelessly. An interesting quirk of his fight is that the player wants to shoot him with regular buster shots after landing the Ice Wall, which causes his invincibility frames to be reduced and also makes it so that he can be chained into multiple ice walls. It's a scary fight to start, but once the first ice wall lands, the rest is pretty easy with practice. Pirate Man is up next and is one of the simpler stages in the game. The whole stage is straightforward with no mini-bosses or even really any problematic platforming areas. However, it does have one thing: whale. The Hogale anime, this time actually underwater. In contrast, Pirate Man's actually one of the hardest Robot Masters. He fires from 1 to 3 remote mines and either jumps or goes into a bubble. By using Wave Burner, you can both damage him and remove him from his bubble, but you have to position yourself to bait his remote mines in a way that you can actually get next to him. And you definitely do not want to move him towards the center of the room, which will make his next remote mine pattern potentially undodgeable. So it is a very narrow position based fight while trying to keep him on the right side of the screen. This fight goes very well here and I move on. The next stage is Astro Man's stage, and it starts out with a somewhat problematic enemy, the Onbu Batons, which are best defeated with 1 clean charge Mega Buster shot. The second screen shows off how not having sub-weapons could make this stage a problem, and why coming here first is not a good idea. But Ice Wall helps here. This is the first appearance of a Joe Classic in the Robot Master stages, and it actually is a consistently difficult enemy. It has a number of attack patterns and they have very different outcomes. The strategy I employ is to use Wave Burner, and while Wave Burner is making contact with its shield, it will continually keep its shield up and not go for an attack. Then, by jumping and using Wave Burner, I can barely bypass its shield while continually resetting its attack pattern by hitting its shield on the way down, and eventually they go down. Anyway, onto Fun Hallway, where enemies spawn randomly from the background. It's a very cool concept, but it's a big pain. Going very slowly, but moving after enemy spawns is the key. Melody Response Cannon blocks the way, but thankfully I never messed up this puzzle once during my time doing this challenge. The rest of the stage has disappearing Yoku blocks and another Melody Response Cannon, then off to the boss. Astro Man is a fairly chaotic fight. It's very important to know how he works. There's basically one of 3 main actions he can take, then while he's in an off pattern, he can swoop down or swoosh down any number of times before going into a main pattern. He begins the fight in an off pattern and will attack in one of 2 arcs immediately. Once you know which main patterns he's on, it's just an execution test, but it's especially important to keep good distance and not put yourself in an unwinnable situation during the off patterns. Off to Ground Man stage. The second screen here features a congested section where an off-screen Met can do one of 2 walking cycles, so it's very important to be patient and wait to cover for the slow pattern. Afterwards, Ice Wall cleans up the Mukamakade section, but importantly, Ice Wall should be used while halfway within the walls to make sure that they expire immediately instead of blocking the way. The mini-boss, Mother Mukamakade, goes down to 2 to 3 remote mines, and the first one can actually be placed and detonated during the little intro cutscene. This fight takes some practice for its spawns, but generally it's not a problem. Getting some weapon energy to refill remote mine is a nice to have for Ground Man, and it does occur in this run. The final screen is a treacherous one. There's a ton of dig mole enemies, and the final Joe Classic is a big pain, but the strategy from before helps. Strict and consistent movement helped me get through this section safely over time. Ground Man himself is another chaotic fight, but knowing how and when he takes his actions helps a lot. Good remote mine placement can force him into a stun animation. His most dangerous attack is by far his own spread drill, and I learned to have good positioning and timing to cover for all 3 patterns of his drill with a remote mine. It's a very claustrophobic fight, but I had a good one here. The next stage is Tengu Man's, and it starts with a simple auto-scroller. Copy vision helps a lot for the next screen with the 10 crow enemies. Tengu Man stage is one of the easier ones, but it's very important to understand how tele-spawns work in this game. The timer for the tele-spawns is tied to when the previous one appears, not when it's defeated. In other words, in order to safely bypass a tele-spawner, it's best to defeat a newly spawned tele and immediately bypass its spawner. Tengu Man himself is one of the easiest fights in the game, and a well-timed slide under him at the start of the fight will put him into a loop with spread drill. Magic Man is the 7th Robot Master, and it's full of tricks. The second screen with the Shu-Pon-Pon enemies is a little scary with the Monopellants attacking. This is one of the few screens in the game that has some lag that will occur, and although this game rarely lags, when it does, it is very, very bad and will often drop inputs, so it's important to have a backup plan. The rest of the stage is mildly difficult, but patience is key, especially during the final vertical climb with spikes. Magic Man himself isn't too challenging of a fight, and keeping a distance from him every time he attacks means he will not use his own magic card attack. Off to the weapon stage to prove that we have 7 out of 8 of the sub-weapons, collect a few large bolts, then it's off to the shop. As mentioned before, I buy the weapon energy balancer and the energy saver for efficient energy usage, the high speed buster charge for an upgraded mega buster, and rush search for some weapon energy utility. Dynamo Man is the final Robot Master. His stage is a little chaotic, but once again consistent and strict movement cleans up the first half of the stage, especially during the long conveyor screens. The mini-boss, Move Cannon, needs to be cleared via 4 defeats of the cannons on each side, a total of 8 defeats. After 4 defeats, they go into an invincible pattern that is fairly easy to dodge with good timing. My strategy revolved around minimizing the amount of projectiles they fire, so I do 3 defeats to the rightmost cannon while neutralizing the leftmost one, then after the invincible pattern, I clear the right cannon and easily finish off the left. The left cannon can cause some issues at the start of the fight, but it went fine in this run. The final few conveyor sections look a little scary, but my speedrunning experience helped here too, and it's off to the boss. Dynamo Man is probably the hardest Robot Master to deal with. He has a litany of patterns and possibilities, and the arena feels very enclosed and small at times. Dynamo Man notoriously will heal himself at certain HP values. He will always heal at least once, but he can heal multiple times if he wants. The big challenge of this fight is to stay safe, and in particular his 5x green Seeker Orbs is the hardest to deal with. Copy vision works wonders against this boss, but very specific placement is necessary to avoid getting hit. It's an all-around very challenging fight with weapon energy management and positioning, but the fight goes well here. After one last visit to the weapon stage to prove the final weapon, it's off to the castle stages. There are 2 King stages and 1 Wily stage. King Stage 1 is a longer stage with a lot of moving parts, but over time it wasn't anything too challenging. One of the harder screens is the first one, where the small tele enemies will spawn strangely and will spawn anywhere on your screen if you are too slow, so moving consistently and with a game plan is important. This is the first use of the very good Lightning Bolt ability, which is a full screen attack and gives Mega Man full invulnerability while it's active, which will get much usage from here. Afterwards, the stage is fairly straightforward and Ice Wall gets a lot of usage. Weapon energy is a concern for the rest of the game, but there are a lot of static weapon energy drops in stages, so the player just needs to be mindful of staying filled up. Atenamino is the first castle boss, and it's quite the boss. In general, staying back on the platform and slowly going down to attack is safe, with the major exception of Atenamino's 2 missile attack pattern, which is extremely dangerous. For this reason, I opt to take a very safe and slow approach to this fight, which is to slowly get in some fully charged buster shots, use copy vision to deal with the Monk King A that spawns, and do my best to avoid being anywhere close to the missile pattern. In this run's fight, the whole thing was stable, but at the very end I almost messed up by jumping back onto the platform as it was going into lava, but thankfully I recovered. This fight is a big test of patience, but I move on. King Stage 2 starts off with what is a gauntlet of 3 stages that are all intertwined. King 2 Part 1 is a simple stage, but the big rhinoceros enemy Psydeca is a little scary. Using a lightning bolt after sliding here covers for both of its possible attack patterns, then I can react to the next attack pattern. King Tank is the first boss of this stage, and with the Energy Saver upgrade, I can get a ton of use out of Lightning Bolt to safely clear the front and top parts of the tank. Once those are down, Remote Mine and Magikarp clean up the back of the tank. This fight is casually a nightmare to fight, but with some knowledge and planning, King Tank goes easily. King 2 Part 2 is next. I get some weapon energy from the chests, then defeat a bunch of enemies along the way to potentially get some more weapon energy back. King Plane is the next fight. It's one of my favorite fights in the game, and it's a little chaotic. In general, most of its patterns are pretty safe, but the big fist attack from it is quite scary as it can destroy platforms. Lightning Bolt thankfully can both give Mega Man invulnerability and can defeat the fists. It's just critically important to not mistime a Lightning Bolt and come out of it right next to a fist, resulting in taking damage. Well-timed spread drills and consistent platforming, even when the screen flashes, results in a victory. King 2 Part 3 is the last of this gauntlet, and after another fairly simple climb, it's off to the king himself. The beginning of the fight is unwinnable, and it's simply about dodging his X pattern 3 times in a row. I actually got hit a few times during previous runs, and I had to clean up my movement and approach to minimize mistiming a slide. Even though it's a very simple dodging pattern, this is a great example of one of those hard parts of this entire challenge. You're trying to keep together a successful run, and you don't want to lose it at all to some easy thing, but it starts to get in your head a little bit. Anyway, it wasn't a problem for this one, then after a cutscene featuring Blues getting wrecked again, we are off to fighting King. At first I thought this fight was going to be very hard, but after utilizing the Energy Saver, I realized that it's possible to simply use Lightning Bolt with good timing between his actions to stun lock him, and it makes the fight almost completely safe. Afterwards, I call Rush Search to try to get some Lightning Bolt energy back, and thankfully our canine friend comes through. Jet King Robo is the last boss in this stage, and it's a fairly complicated fight. The worst pattern is the 4x white tracking orb pattern, and having some extra Lightning Bolt energy is particularly nice. Otherwise, he has a number of patterns that are dangerous but very telegraphed, and with consistent charge buster shot placement and maneuvering, he is defeated. Wily Stage, this game's final stage. This is one of the few entries in the whole Mega Man series where the refights take place within the stage, like Mega Man 1 and Mega Man X. This stage is full of difficult sections, on top of the boss gauntlet, and it's all around just a huge challenge to overcome to finish out the run. Cold Man is up first, and not much has changed. Having the high speed charge for faster charged buster shots is nice here. Afterwards, I have an unnecessarily close encounter with the Yoku Block section, but I managed to not take a death, and it's off to Astro Man. Astro Man was fairly favorable on his pattern here too, and I move on. This next screen requires being ready for the Monopelon in the middle and its bullet projectile, but I manage it well. Dynamo Man is back, and this starts the real stress test of the run. Near the end of the fight, he gave me the dangerous 5-time green orb pattern, but I was ready for it, and although he went for another heal at the end, I managed to clutch it out. Pyro Man is next, and is yet another difficult encounter. All my practice in baiting his remote mines in a favorable way paid off, and I was able to deal with him well. Burner Man is back, and it's either you nail the first ice wall or you don't, and thankfully I did. The next screen, CC Roll, is back from Magic Man stage. CC Roll parades around the room and destroys blocks to give access to the next room. But it's actually very stressful because of how random the platforming outcomes are. My strategy is to deal a lot of damage with Wave Burner, but not enough to defeat the CC Roll. Then, if I'm in a dangerous situation, I use Lightning Bolt to safely defeat CC Roll, then repeat the process. This run's CC Roll room was pretty scary, but I made it out alive. Magic Man guards the next room, but he, once again, is not a problem. Ground Man is the second to last refight, and as always, it's a very close quarters, dangerous fight. I was able to once again use my technique to cover for his spread drill patterns, but I also have a Lightning Bolt as a backup option for this one. Thankfully, I managed to clear him. This final screen needs to be cleared very safely and consciously, as the Wall Tech and Potom enemies spawn off screen and can surprise you with a snipe. Tango Man is the last Robot Master, and easily goes down to the same strategy as before. One last Rush Search segment nets me a large weapon energy to refill Lightning Bolt to max, then we're off to the final boss. Wily Machine here is a variant of Mega Man 8's Machine Fight, but a fairly substantive difference is that sliding under his main body forces him to crash down and reset his pattern, so I can safely stun lock him while doing damage. Messing this up even a little bit often immediately results in damage, so it's a bit scary, but it goes fine here. Alright, Wily Capsule, the final boss. This guy will spawn and teleport in a 4x3 grid, 4 across, 3 down. My positioning in this fight is to avoid getting spawned on, which can happen. This position also is generally good for dealing as much damage as possible. Wily Capsule has 3 attacks: a large circular projectile swarm, a 4x projectile homing attack, and a 4x grenade mine homing attack. Fully charged buster shots are the best way to deal damage, but I use Lightning Bolt aggressively to have invulnerability to bypass attacks. Lightning Bolt ammo is especially important to conserve. This boss has a weird property with its invincibility frames that carry over, so I try to cancel Lightning Bolt as much as possible so that I can deal as much damage as I can with a Mega Buster. Copy Vision gets some usage in this fight to bait some of the high spawn patterns, notably the 4x grenade mine pattern. Further, as part of the rules, I did not allow pressing pause to see what the boss's next actions were going to be, aka pause buffering the boss, and instead only allowed pausing to cancel Lightning Bolt after the boss took an action. Undeniably, this is the hardest part of the run, to clutch out this fight after all the other hard stuff in the game. Good placement, good pattern awareness, and calm nerves wins me the fight, and it's another Mega Man game down. Rockman Forte was the 9th game in the classic Mega Man series I beat without taking damage, after Mega Man 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9. This game is an undeniable challenge for this sort of run. It's a consistently hard game that has a lot of moving parts. My speedrunning experience with this game helped a ton, and just generally knowing how this game operates, specifically how bosses take actions and how to move around efficiently, helps so much. I think this sort of game is what I like most about this no damage challenge. It's all about playing well and consistent without too many gimmicks. Although it's hard, nothing in this game is unfair for this kind of challenge. This is one of my favorite Mega Man games, and it was a blast playing it like this. Thank you for watching. If you like this video and style of the content, please consider subscribing to the channel and let me know your feedback in the comments. See you for the next one.